Morning everybody, how are y'all doing today? I'm doing great because, man, I cannot get enough of the Elden Ring DLC. I'm already on my second playthrough of it. I gotta go back through and play on my mages. And as you can see in this footage right here, I'm just kind of testing some of the DLC items in the regular game against the worst boss in the base game. But while I and millions of others have been loving the DLC, people such as Harman, who have never even played the DLC, are absolutely hating it. Why? Well, I can't speak for everybody else, but in Harman's case, we all know why. It's a popular non-Nintendo game, therefore he has to go against it. But in case you're new to Harman, he doesn't go against games in the sense of, oh, he just hates them or whatever. He also just outright denies their success, which you cannot like something, that's totally fine. But when you outright deny the success, that's just honestly unhealthy to an extent. And that's exactly what he's doing today. He is denying that the Elden Ring DLC is a major success because it had mixed reviews on Steam temporarily because of the performance issues and people were just bad at the game and were complaining that it was too hard. So yeah, I figured we'd take a look at this video and find out exactly how the Elden Ring DLC is a massive failure. Also, quick shameless plug before we get into this. We actually watched this video live on stream on Friday. I stream every Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern on this channel. And honestly, the streams are a ton of fun. We'll be streaming this Friday as well, so be sure to come by if you want to check it out. So anyway, with that little shameless plug out of the way, let's go ahead and get right into this.
Even I couldn't have possibly predicted that Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree, could have flopped as badly as it did. People are doing damage control right now. They're doing the typical FromSlop thing where they're trying to say that, like, well, actually, people just got filtered by the difficulty. Never mind, this is a DLC campaign that requires specific things to be done in the base game to get through, right? Never mind that people know how to play the game, that it's been out forever, that it's old as dirt, that this is...
So apparently a game being 2.5 years old means it's been out forever and it's old as dirt. Okay, bud. Although I will give him this, there was a slight little bit of self-awareness right there when he said even I couldn't have predicted this. Then again, maybe he's trying to like gas himself up and be like, oh yeah, I'm so smart, but even I couldn't have guessed this. I mean, let's be real, that's probably what it was. But yes, dude, people did definitely get filtered by this game. The age of the game doesn't have anything to do with the DLC. Because guess what? In the DLC, the bosses have completely different attacks, different patterns, delays, all that stuff. You can be a complete master at the base game, but the DLC will still likely give you a hard time at least the first time around. Because again, it's all new bosses. It's not like every boss has the same attack pattern or something like that. Also, he's bringing up the fact that you have to do stuff in the base game to access the DLC. I failed to see what this has to do with anything. Like, yeah, people were mad about that, but that doesn't mean the game flopped. That was just something that people were getting pissed about. I mean, this is like saying that because people are mad at a Call of Duty game, that automatically means it was a failure, when in reality, all of them sell millions of copies every year. And speaking of selling millions of copies, Shadow of the Erdtree has already surpassed 5 million sales. That is pretty good for a game that sold 25 million copies. They brought back 20% of the player base to get the DLC.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Supposed to be the biggest DLC campaign of the year. People were calling this Game of the Year worthy, right? Ever since this thing was announced. Like, I remember when people were trying to tell you that Shadows of the Erdtree would outsell Tears of the Kingdom, right, in 2023, and that would win Game of the Year over Baldur's Gate 3. Like,
whoa, hold on. We gotta back up a second. What are you talking about? First of all, who on this planet told you that Shadow of the Erdtree would outsell Tears of the Kingdom? I'm pretty sure Tears of the Kingdom outsold the base game of Elden Ring, so of course a DLC isn't gonna outsell it. And then second of all, what do you mean people were telling you that Shadow of the Erdtree was gonna win Game of the Year 2023 over Baldur's Gate 3? It didn't even come out last year, it just came out this year. It was never set to release last year. Like, what are you talking about? Who told you this? Did you hear this on 4chan? He probably heard it on 4chan. It's either that or he's doing what he usually does where he like has an argument with himself in the shower and then he makes a video arguing against himself. Although he does bring up a good question that I actually want to ask you guys. Shadow of the Erdtree is a DLC, but I've seen a bunch of people say that it's Game of the Year worthy just because it basically is its own $40 game. So what do you think? Does Shadow of the Erdtree deserve to go up for Game of the Year or does it not because it's a DLC? Let me know.
It was like some of the most insane, elaborate cope I've ever seen in my life. Like, it was absurd how hardcore fanboys were in pretending that this game was going to be an industry-defining masterpiece. And now,
well, it is a masterpiece of a DLC, and I do believe it sets a new bar for what a DLC should be. At least, if you're gonna have like a more expensive DLC, this is what it should be. Honestly, Harman's probably just jealous that this DLC is better than the Breath of the Wild DLC. Or, for that matter, really better than any DLC Nintendo's ever released. Look, man, it's okay. You said so yourself. You have a very high-end gaming PC. Just get Elden Ring, get this DLC, and stop blindly hating on it and just play it for yourself.
and now that the game is out, now that it's been forgotten, now that it's like not taking off, now that it's not becoming popular, now that it has mixed reviews on Steam, it couldn't be more clear that not only was I right about the DLC, about how it wasn't going to save the game, how it wasn't going to lead to like some new resurgence of popularity, how it was going to like just kind of flounder. Players would like blast through it in a weekend and then just kind of forget about it. It would not like.
Kinda hilarious how he claims it's been forgotten, and yet here he is making a video on it, like, what, 3 days after it came out or something? So yeah, I guess everybody's forgotten about it except you. Kinda funny how that works, huh? And I just love that he says it's not becoming popular, it's not taking off, when it's still all over YouTube gaming. People are still streaming it, like, every day. And that's not to mention, the game hit, like, 750,000 concurrent players after the DLC dropped. But yeah, this didn't lead to, like, a new surge in popularity or anything, right? That would be absurd. Also, there definitely are people who blasted through this in a weekend, but those people didn't take the time to fully explore and appreciate the DLC. If you actually explore all the DLC has to offer, you're gonna spend, like, I'm not even exaggerating when I say dozens of hours in it. Or I guess you could be like Harman and spend dozens of hours being miserable about and downplaying the game, but I guess whatever floats your boat.
Not only was I right, I was more right than anyone possibly could have predicted, because this game is, I think people are really underestimating just how poorly received this game actually is, right? Right now, people are like doing damage control for it and like bending over backwards to justify like everything they've done here with like the rehashed content and the reused movesets and just, some of the plot elements, right?
This honestly just sounds like major projection, dude. Because this is exactly what you do with Nintendo. But I guess that's perfectly fine, right? Also, no, dude, you are not right in any way whatsoever. Like, I literally do not think you got a single thing right. The reviews were temporarily at mixed, now they're up to mostly positive. They'll probably continue to go up as time goes on. And more importantly, the DLC is great and it's been a massive success. Which you've been saying it's a failure, so therefore you're completely wrong. And also, what do you mean people are underestimating how poorly it's being received? Don't you think you're underestimating how well it's being received? Or I guess you're overestimating how much it's being hated? I just love this. Harman has this attitude every time. He could never be wrong. Everybody else is always completely wrong. They're underestimating, overestimating, whatever. But he is always completely right. Like, I don't think I've ever once seen him admit to being wrong. And honestly, that's just kind of depressing. He truly does believe every single thing he says, and he never even reconsiders it.
But I do think it's safe to say that, like, now that we have all of our questions answered, now that we've gotten the DLC, now that we have gotten all the content in Elden Ring, it's safe to say that Elden Ring did not match up to 2017's Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, let alone the sequels, right?
Well, if you're talking sales, then obviously not. I mean, Breath of the Wild sold, what, like 50, 60 million copies? And I'm sure Tears of the Kingdom over the next few years will probably match up to that. But if we're talking about how good the games were, then yeah, you're right. Elden Ring didn't match Breath of the Wild. It far exceeded it. And I can say that with 100% confidence because I've actually played and beaten Breath of the Wild. Good game, but very overrated for sure. Also, I love how Harman says, oh, well, now we know Elden Ring is officially worse than Breath of the Wild, as if he wasn't always gonna hold that stance no matter what. Like, dude, if you're gonna be a Nintendo fanboy, at least have some self-awareness about it. Am I asking for too much? Most likely.
Elden Ring was a complete failure. In spite of all the shilling campaigns, in spite of the YouTubers, in spite of game journals, Elden Ring was a failure. And
wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong.
Again, just outright denying the facts. Again, you cannot like Elden Ring, that's perfectly fine, but when you start to deny objective facts, it gets a little unhealthy. 25 million copies is not a failure. Almost 1 million concurrent players on Steam is not a failure. And living rent-free in your head for 2.5 years is definitely not a failure. In fact, I would argue it's the game's biggest success, even more so than the 25 million copies sold. But let me guess, that's just a lie. And you have no source to back up the fact that that's a lie. Yeah, I kind of figured as much.
This really needs to be established going forward as to just what happened here, right? You know, this was a game that was propped up artificially by a corrupt game journalist trying to sell you on the idea that PlayStation and Xbox have games that like Nintendo Switch does not have, right?
I mean, that's literally true, though. There are games on Xbox and PlayStation that are not on the Switch. Hundreds, if not thousands, in fact. And Elden Ring is just one of them. Elden Ring is not needed to show that there are games on Xbox and PlayStation that are not on the Switch. Last I checked, Halo and God of War are not on the Switch. Hell, even previous Souls games like Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne are not on the Switch. I'm so confused. What do you mean they're trying to sell you on the idea? They don't need to sell anybody on the idea that PlayStation and Xbox have games the Switch doesn't have, because that's just an objective fact. And also, what do you mean the game was propped up artificially? As in, like, it didn't deserve to be propped up and it's actually bad, but it was? The sheer levels of denial on display right here, it's actually concerning.
They were trying to convince you that, like, FromSoft is some, like, top-tier game developer, when in reality, they aren't anything noteworthy in any way, shape, or form, right? Like, they were trying to tell you that, like, Elden Ring was Game of the Year 2022, Armored Core 6 was Game of the Year 2023, and Shadows of the Erdtree would be Game of the Year 2024. It was insane, right? It was completely out of touch with the reality. Let's just ignore all the better developers out there. Let's just ignore all the better games on Nintendo platforms.
There it is. Of course, it has to be on Nintendo platforms. That was actually really weird. My ear popped in the middle of me yelling that. You know what? That's a sign. Yell more. But whatever, putting that aside, of course, on Nintendo platforms specifically. He's not even hiding the bias anymore, which, I mean, to be fair, he wasn't really doing a good job of hiding it to begin with. But he's just so open about it now, and I, like, half respect it, but it's also kind of depressing. But yes, Harman, FromSoft are in fact top-tier developers. And Elden Ring was in fact Game of the Year 2022. Not just in my personal opinion, but also according to the Game Awards. Also, Harman, you calling somebody else out of touch with reality has got to be the most ironic thing I've seen in a minute. Because guess what, Harman? There were no better games on the Switch. Baldur's Gate 3 and Armored Core 6 were both better than Tears of the Kingdom. But hey, you don't even have to take my word for it. Just look at what won Game of the Year 2023. Which, by the way, guys, don't forget, he said he wouldn't be watching the Game Awards again after last year. So I'm very excited for December to see if he sticks to his word or not.
Let's just ignore the fact that Elden Ring specifically ignored the Nintendo Switch, right? They did not release on Nintendo Switch because they knew, right, that if players were able to compare Elden Ring and Zelda side by side, it would be exceedingly obvious that Elden Ring is inferior to Zelda in every way, shape, and form. Like, you know, like, just like The Witcher and Dragon Age before it,
I mean, we literally can compare Elden Ring and Zelda side by side. Elden Ring might not be on the Switch, but we can still compare it to Zelda. And Elden Ring exceeds Zelda in every single way imaginable. And no, Harman, they didn't not put Elden Ring on the Switch because they didn't want people to compare it to Zelda. They didn't put Elden Ring on the Switch because the Switch can't run it. I'm honestly amazed they were able to put it on the PS4 and the Xbone. But you know what? I'm starting to realize something, because Harman just pointed out that it skipped the Switch, and he sounded very upset about it. Maybe the reason Harman hates Elden Ring is because he actually loves it, but he's denying his love for the game because it's not on the Switch. Because we know that Harman hates any game that isn't on the Switch, right? But I'm gonna take it a step further and say he actually does like Elden Ring, but he's just really upset that it's not on the Switch. So instead of swallowing his pride and saying, yeah, this game is great, I wish it was on the Switch, he's gonna make FromSoft look like the bad guys for skipping the Switch when it can't even run the game. Dude, just admit you want the game on the Switch. It's okay. You can do it. I believe in you.
these games, the illusion that these games are better than Zelda is nothing more than like a smokescreen cast by game journals. Like, oh, look at the mature storylines. Oh, look at the dark visuals. Oh, they're so much cooler than Zelda. But in reality, they're just nothing special. So,
I mean, it's more than just the great visuals and the dark storytelling that makes Elden Ring better than Zelda. The gameplay is also far better. You know, the most important aspect of a game, how it plays, is better. Especially since you don't have to worry about your weapon breaking every 3 seconds. In fact, I think I remember somebody modded Elden Ring to be like Zelda, where your weapon's broken like 3 hits. And it was the worst thing ever. I was in pain watching it. I felt so bad for the dude who did that run. I think it was Lil Aggie, but I could be wrong about that. Shout out to him. He makes good Elden Ring videos.
So what can we learn from this when it comes to Shadows of the Year Tree? Like, what can we take away from this? Like, first of all, we really need to establish like the pattern whenever like someone starts like talking about how a Souls game is disappointing, right? You know, because this happened with Sekiro, this happened with Dark Souls 2, this happened with like, you know, the more poorly received From Slap games in recent years. Is that every single time the audience accuses you of not being good at the game. This happens to me whenever I bring up how Dark Souls is casual, is that like, oh man, you just got filtered by it. No, I've beaten Dark Souls, right? You know, I just don't like the game, is the real issue here.
See, that right there, that is a good example of it being okay to dislike something. You played and beat Dark Souls, you didn't like it, okay, there you go. You are justified in not liking it. Your hatred for Elden Ring, however, is completely unjustified. Also, I know bro is not trying to combine Sekiro and Dark Souls 2 into the same category. Dark Souls 2 was widely hated when it released. Sekiro is considered one of the best FromSoft games ever made, which, by the way, Sekiro is 50% off with the Steam Summer Sale. Should I pick it up? Let me know. I'm sure the response is going to be overwhelmingly yes, but I just want to make sure. But whatever, moving on from that, yes, there are always going to be people in the FromSoft community who say, oh, you're just bad, that's why you don't like the game. But in a lot of cases, especially when it comes to this DLC, that actually is true. I mean, hell, I just recently did a video where I read negative Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree reviews, and pretty much all of them were complaining about how difficult the game was. Now, there are legitimate criticisms, of course, like the performance is absolutely terrible, and Commander Gaius' god-awful hitbox on his charge attack. But besides that, a lot of criticisms, such as your own, are just kinda wrong.
I know it's your opinion, but your opinion's wrong.
Right? Being able to beat it has nothing to do with people not liking games, okay? Like, Dark Souls, FromSoft games at their core are not very fun, they're not very memorable, they're not very engaging, they don't have a lot going for them, right? They don't have good combat, they don't have good gameplay, they don't have any... There's no reason to play them, really.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong.
Apologies for using the same clip a second time, but I've just never heard so much wrong in my entire life. And also, you want to talk about unfun combat? Let's talk about Breath of the Wild. Constantly having to swap weapons every 5 seconds because they keep breaking. Even the Master Sword, one of the best weapons in the game, still breaks very quickly. You're constantly pausing the game to perform like any action. Like, I would go as far as to say Elden Ring has some of the most fun gameplay just out in general. At least when it comes to like third-person action-adventure games, yeah, I would say Elden Ring has top-tier gameplay. Everything feels like it has weight and impact. The sound design is extremely good. Like, when you get a stagger, the sound it plays is super satisfying. And who knows, maybe I am going too hard on Harman here because this is a matter of opinion. But at the same time, he's only played Dark Souls 1. I really feel like he should try playing some more modern Souls games before he gives his final verdict on the gameplay. Because even the jump from Dark Souls 3 to Elden Ring is pretty big. There's so many improvements, so I can't even imagine how much better it would be going from Dark Souls 1 to Elden Ring. But if it's not on the Switch, Harman's not going to play it, so what am I expecting?
People only play FromSoft games in order to feel a sense of being... In order to, like, feel like they're in on gamer culture, right? It's a status symbol. That's all it is. That's all it ever was. Like, Dark Souls is the game you want to get through in order to pretend as if you're better than other gamers, right? Like, that's all this amounts to,
Again, just the irony of this statement. Because Harman here feels like he's better than others because he plays on the Switch. But also, I gotta ask, you say people play Dark Souls to feel superior to other people, which, by the way, is not true. But let's assume it was. You claim you played and beat Dark Souls, so what does that say about you? And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not gonna deny, of course, there's the Souls elitists out there who are like, oh, you have to beat this game with a club only, unupgraded, no armor, level 1 the whole time, and you can't dodge. Otherwise, did you really beat the game? Did you really have a hard time? Of course, there's those people, and those people suck. But most of the Souls community are just normal people who just play Souls games because they're fun. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Just playing a game because it's fun, and not blindly hating on other games because you can't play them? Man, what a concept.
Right. You know, you can see this on social media right now. Nobody's talking about the DLC or, like, you know, what you do in it or the plot elements. No, they're trying to pretend that the people who don't like the DLC, right, people like me, people who don't like FromSoft in general, are just casuals who just will never be able to have the skill set to, like, hold the block button and just slowly walk forward. Occasionally, like, swiping your weapon at whatever gets in your way. Like, again...
I mean, it's not that simple, but okay. You could play the game like that if you wanted to, I just highly advise against it. And if you played Dark Souls 1 like that, then no wonder you didn't like it. But yes, dude, people are talking about the plot, people are talking about the gameplay, people are talking about all the areas there are, but you're just ignoring that because it doesn't fit your narrative. AKA, another day, another Harman video. And again, yes, not every single person who dislikes the DLC dislikes it because of the difficulty, but a big reason the game was getting review bombed on Steam was because of the difficulty. It was such a complaint, in fact, that a few days ago they rolled out an update which changed the scaling of Tree fragments to make the earlier Tree levels give you more of a buff. If that doesn't prove that difficulty was a huge complaint, I don't know what does.
Like, Dark Souls is not hard, you know, Elden Ring is not difficult, right? Like, being KO'd in one hit isn't, like, some radical, like, innovative game design decision, right? You know, the game is clunky, it's slow, it's unintuitive. Like, again, Elden Ring is nothing special, right? In a lot of ways, I do think that's the major takeaway with the DLC is that, like, the base game wasn't good either, right? Like, that's the major thing I want people to know when, like, they start, like, realizing, like, wow, this DLC is really short, it's really boring, it really doesn't have a lot going for it. The base game was the same way.
Yeah, you know, a 100+ hour base game followed by a DLC which you can spend dozens of hours in. Yeah, that's definitely short and boring, am I right? Also, if you're getting KO'd in one hit in Elden Ring or Dark Souls, that's not even a skill issue, that's just you having like a terrible build or something. You should not be getting one shot by almost anything. Unless you're on like New Game 7 and you get grabbed by some late game boss. If you're getting one shot, that's actually just a you problem at that point. Also, I just love that he claims Elden Ring isn't difficult when he hasn't even played it. Like, at least with Dark Souls 1, he's played it so he can make that claim. Dude, how about you actually play Elden Ring before you claim whether it's hard or not, especially the DLC? Because it's one thing to watch a YouTube video and just have hindsight and be like, oh, well, he should have done that. He should have dodged that direction. Oh, if I were there, I totally would have done that. It's another situation when you're actually playing the game for yourself. Also, I have to ask, how is it a major takeaway from the DLC that the base game wasn't good? Wouldn't we have known that already if that were true? Like, you don't need a whole expansion for a game to figure out the base game was bad. In case you couldn't tell, I'm very confused right now. Then again, that's a normal thing to feel while watching a Harman video, so I guess it's not really an issue.
Right? It was something that was hyped up in order to basically because gamers on other platforms don't have alternative platforms, don't have anything worth talking about or playing, right? You know, whereas Nintendo fans were getting things like Pokemon Legends Arceus and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, ARMS, Splatoon 3, right? We get like bangers every month, it feels like, right?
Bro said we get bangers every month, and not a single one of those games he just mentioned were released in the same year. Like, dude, are you actually kidding me right now? Also, I love that he says, oh, gamers on other platforms don't have anything worth talking about. Hey, bud, I'm gonna let you in on a secret. Maybe the reason people are talking about Elden Ring is because it's a good game that's worth talking about. Isn't that such a mind-blowing concept? Maybe, in fact, Elden Ring is a good game that's worth talking about and you're just in denial about it. This is either blowing your mind right now as you hear it, or you're just sitting there plugging your ears saying, la la la, I can't hear you. I'm too busy playing Princess Peach Showtime or something like that. Yeah, bro, I'm real jealous of all those great games you got over there.
Meanwhile, like, FromSoft fans are, like, starving, just starving for content. They get excited over everything. Like, oh, is that a Berserk reference? Like, oh, man, it looks like we're going to do the Eclipse. Oh, man, that was so hardcore. They do this thing every single time where they just act as if they're some enlightened individuals that really understand video games. And
dude, I'm like actually about to be done. The irony is off the charts. This has to be satire. There's no way he's serious. It is not possible for someone to be this non-self-aware. I don't believe it. I won't believe it. And even putting that aside, I love that he says FromSoft fans are starving for content as he sits here talking about a $40 DLC that you can play for dozens of hours on just a single playthrough. Yeah, I'm just really starving here as a FromSoft fan. Like, God, could you project any harder? Actually, that sounded weird. Please don't do that.
The bitter reality, the grim reality, is that they don't know anything at all, right? They don't have any skill sets outside of like the stereotypical FromSoft formula, right? They don't appreciate other games. They don't appreciate more difficult games, right? It really does feel as if like Dark Souls fans are like genuinely believe that FromSoft titles are like the most difficult titles out there. But you just know that if these guys ever played something like Gradius 3, they would get wrecked, right?
Alright, I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea what that is, but nobody's saying that Dark Souls games are like the hardest ever. I mean, maybe some people say that, but I'm definitely not saying that. I'm sure there's games out there harder than Dark Souls. I'm just saying there's probably not many. Dark Souls 3 and the Elden Ring DLC are the hardest games I've ever played. And also, I have skill sets for games outside of Dark Souls, thank you very much. I'm decent at COD. I'd say I'm pretty good at Doom Eternal at this point. Ghost of Tsushima, Phasmophobia. Like, I'm good at games outside of just Souls games. It's just that not every game demands you get as good at them as Souls games do. Also, what's this weird, like, jealousy thing? It almost seems like he's jealous that FromSoft games are difficult, and most of them aren't on the Switch outside of, like, Dark Souls Remastered. Is he jealous that he doesn't have other difficult games on his platform? I don't know at this point, man. I'm just waiting for this video to be over, honestly.
To me, it couldn't be more apparent that the FromSoft formula is on the way out, right? Like, I don't even know why they bother releasing DLC, because to me, it just seems like they wasted a ton of time and resources on this. Like, I'm seeing people, like, speculate that the reason the DLC is so terrible is because FromSoft wasted all their time and resources developing Armored Core 6. And, of course, like, Armored Core 6 was a flop. It did not reach the numbers Elden Ring did.
There's so much to unpack here. Okay, first of all, Armored Core is a flop because it didn't reach Elden Ring numbers. So now a game has to reach 20 to 25 million sales or else it's a flop. You do realize that not every game has to sell tens of millions of copies, right? I mean, look at Stellar Blade, for example. That only sold like 1 million copies and Shift Up is considering that a success. Not every game has to be a breakout hit to be successful. And then he says that the FromSoft formula is on the way out. How can you say that when it's more popular than ever and more Souls-likes are being released than ever? Again, he hates the game so much, he's just denying objective facts. It's honestly really sad to watch. And then he claims that they wasted time and money on the DLC as if they didn't already make their money back. Like, dude, what are you talking about? It doesn't matter how bad you think a DLC is. If they turned a profit, that's all that matters. Thank God we're almost done with this video, dude. I don't know how much more of this I can take at this point.
Like where is FromSoft going to go from here? Like, they can't just bring Tenchu back. Sekiro was never popular, right? Dark Souls can't just keep milking Dark Souls forever, right? Like, FromSoft does not have the technical ability or the talent to innovate, to make new IPs, to make new franchises. It's just going to be the same thing over and over and over again. And I think the DLC is a very good example of just what exactly is wrong with FromSoft.
Where are they gonna go from here? Well, either Sekiro 2 or Elden Ring 2, because despite what you say, both games were very popular and very successful. And I'm gonna be completely honest, FromSoft doesn't need to innovate. I mean, obviously they should keep adding like new weapons and maybe some new movesets and stuff. And obviously they'll have to keep doing new bosses, but they don't really need to innovate the formula that much. I mean, Elden Ring really just took Dark Souls and made it open world. Like, they've pretty much perfected the Souls formula, so they don't even have to innovate it anymore. Would it be nice if they did? Of course. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But yeah, anyway guys, we finally made it to the end of the video, thank God. This video took me way longer to make than I was expecting. This actually has taken 2 days. Normally I just record it all in one night. But I had a good time and I hope you did as well. Oh, and also we did not hit the sub goal on the last video. Basically on the last video I said if we hit 12k subs off the video, I would do a Shadow of the Erdtree giveaway, but I've decided to extend it to this video as well just because the last video didn't like pop off or anything. So if you're new here and you enjoyed the content, then please be sure to subscribe. And if we do hit 12k off this video, then in the next video I'll announce the giveaway. So yeah, with all that being said, that's gonna do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go do what Harman should do and hit the gym. So yeah, with all that being said, be sure to like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't like it, subscribe if you want to see more. Join us every Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern for Salt streams, and I will catch you all next time.